did not do it last year or this year. We did a mini version this year, and we're doing a fall retreat and it's for adults from anywhere that we get consent.
All right. We're good, Houston. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. We're back. Hello, everyone. Okay. So anyway, nobody likes to be told what to do. So here's a key definition that is essential to this whole idea of understanding leadership through what we call family systems theory. And it's the idea of self-differentiation. Not selfishness, not self-centeredness, self-differentiation. And it's the ability of a family member or a leader to define his or her own life's goals and values apart from surrounding togetherness pressure. So let me try to unpack that, okay? It's your ability to unpack your own life's goals and values apart from surrounding togetherness pressure. And I have another example I'm going to give in here, but here's an example that is really prevalent right now, right? Mask? No mask.
Yeah.
Surrounding togetherness pressure is pressure to conform to people around you, right? And I mean, I guess we had some mask battles, right? It can even get violent. Vaccinate, not vaccinate. Isolate, not isolate. All of these things, they create surrounding togetherness pressure. Now, I'm vaccinated, okay? But I have 2 young grandchildren that I see often, and I have my 98-year-old mother lives with me, and so I've chosen to keep masking in public places. I came in the mask, right? And I'm like, oh, what if nobody else is masking? When I feel out of place, that's surrounding togetherness pressure. And surrounding togetherness pressure is really more about what's in us. Sometimes people impose it on us, right? People have expectations on us. But the ability to be a non-anxious presence, to claim our own goals and values, is the ability to say, this is what I'm going to do, even if other people disagree with it, even if they're not okay with it. I'm okay with being who I am. That's what self-differentiation is. Now, the classic examples I like to give of surrounding togetherness pressure have to do with holidays. So holidays in a family, especially when you have like a couple coming together, boy, that can create surrounding togetherness pressure because there are expectations about who should be where or what you should do, that kind of thing. My first New Year's dinner with my wife's family, we weren't even married yet. Their tradition, they're from Pennsylvania, is to have pork and sauerkraut. And so they're passing stuff around, and they put the mashed potatoes down. I put the mashed potatoes down. My wife gets the sauerkraut. She put sauerkraut on her mashed potatoes.
Oh, that's weird.
I looked and I said, who put sauerkraut on your mashed potatoes? They all looked at me like I was crazy, right? We do.
I ain't the crazy one.
They're not the crazy one. I'm the crazy one. I got issues. So one of the stories I like to tell about holidays is my friend across the street. We used to always get a tree, but we had a fake tree. It was really ugly, but we would assemble it in early December and decorate it, and then presents would come in the mail, and then Christmas Eve we'd go to bed and Santa would come and put presents under the tree. We'd wake up and Christmas, right? Best friend across the street, Jamie, they got a tree maybe 2 days before Christmas, and it would lean up behind their house. It was a real tree. They would go to bed. And then Santa Claus would come, bring the tree in, and decorate it, and put all the presents. And it's like,
well, it only took Santa magically a couple of seconds.
Yeah, how does Santa have all that time at Jamie's house? But we got to just assemble our own tree, right? Now, and then the guy who was my best man, Mike, there were 4 kids in his family. He would get up on Christmas morning and come down, and there were 4 piles of presents, all unwrapped. And each pile was for each kid. I see you shaking your head over there.
Can't do that.
And he's like, oh, it's so awesome. You just see all your presents at once. It's like overload. It's like stimulus. And well, what's right and what's wrong?
That's wrong. No, that's wrong.
It's not right. It's not right. See, It's about whatever each family does, right? Every system has its own norms and values. And that creates surrounding togetherness pressure. So in a church, right, we've always done it this way, right? We've always done it this way. That's surrounding togetherness pressure. And the way I like to put it for us in terms of our own families, do you know what this is? What that is? It's a computer punch card.
Oh, yeah.
That's how we used to program computers way back when, right? So think of the norms in your family of origin, your own family, or in your church. Think of them as software that program how we respond. Because most of the time when we're responding to something we're not thinking. We're just acting. So when pastor proposes something and somebody says, oh, we've never done it that way before. Well, we're not thinking. We're just acting, right? We're just responding automatically. And that's what surrounding togetherness pressure does. It creates this automatic response to situations often filled with anxiety. And the ability to be a non-anxious presence in those situations is what the leader needs to be able to do. The leader needs to be able to remain calm. Now, the idea of leadership through self-differentiation, if self-differentiation is being able to claim your own goals and values in the midst of surrounding togetherness pressure, then a leader who leads through self-differentiation is able to say, this is what I believe. Take responsibility for his or her own goals. This is where I believe God is leading us, while staying in touch with the rest of the organism, and that would be the congregation or the organization. If the leader can do that, there is a good chance the body will follow. This is the idea of saying what you believe while giving others the freedom to disagree. If the leader can say, here's where I think we should go, and stay connected to people in the congregation, especially those who resist. The hard part is there are going to be those who resist change. And the leader's responsibility is to stay connected to those who resist change. Because if you don't stay connected, then they will get worse. They will feel more anxious. And then, well, I'll share what happens. It's called sabotage. So I like to use Dr. King as an example of somebody who was a self-differentiated leader. Somebody who knew exactly what he believed. And he didn't tell people you had to agree with him. He gave people the choice to follow. And he was even willing to experience fire hoses and dogs and prison, right, for what he believed. But he very much modeled himself on Jesus, who was all about what he believed, but didn't fight back, right? Stayed focused on where he was headed. And if you look at some of these sayings here, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Most of us know that quote.
I have a dream.
That's all about what he believes, right? He's not saying you have to agree with me. He's just saying, this is I, and not in a selfish way, right? But in like an inviting way. I believe that if we went here, we would be in a better place. And that's what a non-anxious presence does. So let's move through the 2 components of leadership through self-differentiation. First is self-definition, just like you were saying. I believe, I think, I want you to hear what I have to say, but you don't have to agree with me. So self-definition is knowing what you believe and being able to express it in a healthy way. Emotional connection is the ability to stay in touch with people who are anxious, people who resist, people who want to criticize you, people who want to argue with you, and not fight with them, but not disconnect with them either. Because either one is not going to be helpful. If you fight with people, right, they're going to get worse. They're going to get more entrenched. There are statistics that tell us that when you try to tell somebody that you're right and they're wrong, they will even harden their position even more. So you can't fight with them, but at the same time, if you withdraw, if you disconnect from them, they will get even more anxious and start to cause problems. And that's what we have to be careful of. So one of the principles that's helpful to understand in all of this, especially in dealing with an anxious system, anxious people, is this idea of a triangle. So an emotional triangle is formed by any three persons or issues. And the idea is that when two parts of the triangle become uncomfortable with one another, they will focus on the third person or issue. So the classic triangle might be that two spouses, say a husband and a wife, are uncomfortable in their relationship. They don't really acknowledge it, right? And so the husband invests himself in his work. He kind of, you would say, has an affair with his work. He's so invested in his work that his wife starts to feel like, left out, right? And so what do? Well, the wife complains to the husband, "You're working too much. Why are you working so much? You don't care about me," right? And the husband's like, "Leave me alone. That's my job. I'm trying to take care of you." And all of the focus is on the work. When in reality, what family systems would tell us is, if the husband would actually spend more time emotionally with his wife, right, she might not care if he worked as much, right? But they focus on the work, and that's a triangle. So let me give you another example of a triangle. There was a real situation that I encountered. So I was going into a Christmas Eve service. It was my first service in a new church that I was serving, and we were doing something I thought was really cool. This was back in 1996, and we were doing readers theater. Instead of doing the lessons of carols and readings, readers theater. So we had four young adults. I say young adults; they were in their 50s, but four young adults on chairs, on stools, with music stands, dressed in black, and they're going to read a dramatic reading of the Christmas story. Oh, this is awesome, So I walk into the church, 15 minutes before the service, and this woman comes up to me, and she says, "I never thought this is not a Christmas Eve service. This is ruining it. This is kind of awful," And what's going on there? So number one, don't argue, right? Not going to argue. And I said, "Well, thanks for sharing. I can count on you to always tell me how you feel." She went, and walked off. So then I asked our lay leader, I said, "Is everything okay?" Well, 2 years ago, her adult daughter died right around Christmas time. Okay, that's a triangle. Here's the triangle. It's the woman and her grief over her daughter, because this can be any three persons or issues, right? And the Christmas Eve service. And this is what people do. It's called pain displacement. When they're uncomfortable with their own pain, okay, they lash out at something else. You'll recognize this. It's kicking the dog, right? Like if you have a bad day at work,
Dad gets home and kicks the dog.
Go home and kick the dog, right? And it's not the dog's fault. You just triangled the dog. You should be going to your boss and saying to your boss, I really feel the way you treated me was unfair. But how many of us are adult enough to do that, right? And so we take it out on somebody else. I don't kick the dog, but there is a chance I might pick a fight with my wife. And it's not her fault, right? That's a triangle, though. So the reason it's helpful to understand triangles is oftentimes when people act up in our families, in our churches, in our companies, it actually doesn't have anything to do with what they're complaining about, the person they're complaining about. It has everything to do with what's going on inside of them somewhere else. And so I coach pastors. When somebody starts acting up in the church, the first thing I ask is, what's going on with them personally? Because it's usually, especially if there are people who normally are pretty even-keeled, and they start acting up, criticizing, complaining, whatever, maybe they're going through something like they're a death in the family, or a conflict with a sibling or a parent, or something else, a severe illness, and nobody knows about it. And this is how they're processing it. That's what a triangle is. So the reason this is important in leadership is that when we are leading change, the change itself or some other issue can become a triangle where somebody may not be happy about the change, but they're not able to speak up about it. Oh, Pastor, that's okay. Yeah, do what you want to do. But then they start criticizing Betty because you know what she does all day, and then that distracts the pastor's attention. Pastor's got to deal with that, right? It's what's called sabotage.
Passive aggressive.
Passive aggressive behavior, yeah. And I actually had some people who they don't like the word sabotage because it makes it sound intentional. And in most cases, sabotage is unconscious. It is just people not being able to deal with their own discomfort, and so they take it out on something else. I know of an example of a pastor who they had a member of the church council all of a sudden started complaining about the budget, and they just approved it, a few months earlier. And when she started to dig deeper, it turns out he was having conflict with his brother, and the budget became the way he was displacing his pain. Yeah. So why does sabotage matter? Because when you're leading change, okay, the easiest part is to get the leadership to agree. Oh, we're going to start a new service, or we're going to do a feeding ministry, or we're going to try to reach out to young adults. Everybody agrees, but then the people who are most uncomfortable with it, but who were not able to express themselves in a healthy way, start to complain. And they don't usually complain about the actual ministry itself. They'll complain about the pastor's preaching, or the pastor doesn't visit enough, or the choir director is domineering with the hymns, or whatever. I mean, you guys know church, right? This is how church works. We do a lot of complaining in church about other people instead of taking responsibility for our own feelings. And so when we're leading change, it's really important to understand the dynamic of sabotage because it's almost certain to come up. And the most important thing that a pastor can do is a pastor is stay connected and be a non-anxious presence with all those who are involved, especially those who resist. I teach an online course on family systems theory, and last summer I had a pastor in the course who was in a pretty good-sized church in another state, and he had decided that they weren't ready to meet in person. Okay, he just felt like, you know what it was like last summer, right? We had no idea and no vaccine or anything, but there were 25 families in the church who left the church because they disagreed. They were upset about this, and so he said, "What do I do about that?" I said, "Well, I think the most important thing you can do is stay connected to those families, especially whoever the leader is." And so what he did was he started making phone calls. And what he found out right away was, the people were telling him, "Oh, don't worry. Once we meet in person, we'll be back. We're just supporting so-and-so who was kind of like the ringleader." Right? And so by staying connected to those people who left the church, he opened the door for them to come back. Right? And he wasn't trying to convince them to come back. Remember, people don't like to be told what to do. He said, I just want to let you know I care about you. I'm praying for you, that kind of thing. Give them the freedom to decide what to do. So he did that. And then when he got to the ringleader, he found out that the ringleader had lost his job because of COVID, that his wife had lost her job because of COVID. They both had contracted it. They had been seriously ill. So all this sabotage was a triangle, right? They were blaming the church when they were having a lot going on in their own home. And so what he did was he just said to them, I care about you. Feel free to do what you need to do. But when things are over, if you want to come back, you're welcome. And if not, that's fine too. Now, our course ended, and I never found out how many of those people came back, but I'm willing to guess that most of them did. Maybe not the ringleader, but that's what sabotage is like, and that's how we can deal with it. So one of the things that's helpful is to understand the difference between emotional process and content. So the emotional process is the anxiety that's going on. So in the example where the woman was upset about the Christmas Eve service, right? That's the content. The Christmas Eve service is, she's arguing about the Christmas Eve service. And as a leader, what we want to understand is, as soon as we start arguing content with anxious people, with people who are, allowing their emotions to spill out all over the place, we're stuck. I don't know if you've ever gotten in an argument.
They're all over the place to begin with,
and you
then,
can't win. You cannot win. I mean, I can tell you, when my wife tries to convince me that I'm wrong and I'm all emotional, she's not going to win. I'm not giving in, right? I told you I had issues, right? So
I do. It's just easier that way.
yeah. So
I'm not going to die on that hill.
We don't want to get into the content of the issue when somebody's very emotional and anxious and allowing that anxiety to create problems. Because the emotional process is telling us something else is going on. That was the clue for me. Something else is going on, so I didn't want to argue with her. Don't argue, I don't agree. And what I found out was the emotional process was her grieving. She was still grieving her daughter's death. So if I had tried to convince her that I was right and she was wrong, I would have never probably even gotten to that point of being able to understand what she was going through. And interestingly, I called her the week after Christmas and I said, I'd like to come visit, just see how you're doing. And then when I got there, I said, I understand that your daughter died 2 years ago. And then she was able to share, and the Christmas Eve service never came up. It wasn't
Right.
the issue, right? So a lot of times people will use things as a crutch, as a way to displace their pain and anxiety, to get into an argument to help relieve their anxiety, when in reality the emotional process that's going on is we want to be able to help them get past that. And the only way we can do that is by not arguing, by remaining a non-anxious presence. So a couple more slides here, a few more slides. So one of the things that's important for a leader is to be able to have vision. The leader's primary role is to say, this is where I think we should be going. Because if we're not leading, if we're not giving vision, how can we get anywhere, right? We have to have a vision of where we're going. However,
If you're not advancing, you're retreating.
if you're not advancing, you're retreating. That's right. And that's because everything else is moving on without you, right?
Past you, right?
So, but this is the way I like to think of vision, okay? So we kind of know where our destination is, right? But it's through the fog, right? And we can see that far in front of us, but we can't see any farther. And the idea is, if we didn't go anywhere because we couldn't see, we'd be stuck, right? So we have to be able to move forward some. And what happens when we do that? We see a little farther, right? And then we have to be able to move forward some, and then we see a little farther. And so vision isn't about knowing what the ultimate outcome looks like completely. It's just having an idea and being able to say, this is where I think we should be going, and let's move. Let's take a step. Let's see what happens. And as we do that, we start to see a little more, and we start to see a little more. And if we can do that and also remain present with the anxious people, we have a chance. That's what I've learned.
Instead of the tunnel vision, you're getting a little more of the
broader.
At least the 180.
That's right. That's right. At least the 180. Okay. So one of the concepts I think that is helpful for me to understand is an idea called the leverage of the dependent. So dependent people are people who depend on others for their emotional well-being. Okay. So I need you to take care of me, or you never compliment me, or I don't know if you know people who are like that, but it always seems like it's about them, but it's about what you're not doing for them or should be doing for them. Those are dependent people. And when dependent people tend to be the ones that hold organizations, hold family systems, hold congregations back, because they're not going to be comfortable with change, and they're going to somehow triangle and get you stuck in some kind of what we like to call conflict of wills, where you're trying to convince them that you're right and they're wrong. And as long as you are trying to do that, as long as you're trying to get them to agree with you, you're stuck. You're holding that thing, and they're just keeping you stuck, right? But if you let go of the rope and you say, this is where I'm going, feel free to follow if you'd like, all of a sudden, they have no more leverage. They can't keep you stuck because then they have to convince you to slow down, stop. Well, I'll stop, but if you don't want to follow, that's okay. Giving people the freedom to follow, and this is and being willing to call their bluff on their ultimatums is how we deal with the leverage of the dependent. So
You know,
go ahead.
that's kind of how I work things in York, you know, when I was there doing that. And when I kind of described that to other pastors, you know, circuit counselor, you know, the district superintendent you'd call, you know, that kind of thing, I sort of got this look like, oh, well, you can't do that. You have to get everybody on board. You have to get everybody to agree. You have to get, and my experience was exactly what you're saying. It's, no, you don't.
No.
At some point, you just got to let them go, and you got to move on and collect, you know, what you can.
It's called the tyranny of the minority.
Yeah.
So if you have to get everybody to agree to move on, then a handful of people can keep you stuck, right? That's the tyranny of the minority. So another example I have is when I was being moved to a church, they do what's called a take-in. So the district superintendent goes in and meets with the staff parish relations committee, the personnel committee, and does an introduction on paper of the pastor, and then they bring the pastor in. So I was just told what happened, but the district superintendent describes who I am and then says the new pastor has an earring. Well, one of the members of the committee was livid and said, I will not have a pastor with an earring. If we have a pastor with an earring, I'm leaving the church. Well, another one of the women, a wise old saint, turned to her and said, well, we will miss you. See, that's the difference. She was being dependent, right? And if you say, oh, please don't leave, we'll work this out, so
Right.
You're stuck.
Right.
But if you say, okay, you don't have to follow, it's your choice.
I mean, you know, I'm sure when there's room to negotiate, you know, try to negotiate. You try to deal with it. But when you're dealing with somebody that's just so dug in and expects you to try and yank them out of the concrete,
Yeah. You'll be stuck. You'll be stuck just like that.
Right. What are you going to do? Drop at that point and just, you can't do it.
Well, that's what some people do, though.
Yeah.
Some
right.
leaders give up, and that's
and that seems to be the leaders, especially in the higher levels. You know, well, you can't do that, Jim. And it's like, well, I have done it, and you know,
right.
And,
it's what worked for me.
Thank you for that affirmation. Maybe you can come to our next circuit meeting and you know.
I'll come if I'm invited.
Nobody listens to me. You know?
So one thing that's helpful is to understand the concept of pain and responsibility, because what we tend to do is we try to relieve people of their pain. We don't allow people to experience pain because we think that's a bad thing. But in reality, pain is an opportunity for growth, just like grief is an opportunity to get stronger. And, you know, if this were my kid, somebody would say, he's going to get hurt. My mother would say this. My mother's 98. She lives with us. He's going to burn his hand if he touches that. And you know, my response would be, well, only once. Right? But if I keep
right.
pulling back, what is he going to want to do?
Right.
He wants to keep going back and trying it again, right? So part of being a healthy leader is allowing other people to experience their own pain. And in fact, what I found is when people are in pain and they're lashing out, the best thing we can do is move closer to them and help them to acknowledge the pain that they're actually experiencing and work through it. And when you do that, you actually gain allies. You actually gain people who are going to want to support you because you've helped them through a difficult time. So how do you maintain a non-anxious presence? Well, the first thing you can do is listening. Listening, by definition, is being a non-anxious presence because you're not trying to convince them to agree with you. You're not arguing, right? But you're also not disconnecting. You're staying close. You want to know. And by listening to other people, you are able to give them a chance to work through their anxieties, to vent. In fact, I don't know how many times I've had somebody come to me and start going off, either about me or about somebody else, and I just listen and I ask what we call reporter questions: who, what, when, where, how. Yeah. How often does this happen? What does it feel like? Da 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 da. Let them go, let them go, let them go, and then at some point they'll go, "Oh, thanks, I feel better. I just needed to vent." Right? Now, if I got defensive, or if I started arguing with them, we would be doing this, right? And we might not ever get anywhere. So the idea of listening is an important way to maintain a non-anxious presence.
What's the one question you don't ask?
Why? Yes. Yeah, I put that in the book. You don't ask why because people don't understand why they do things. And it tends to shut them down.
Right. They try to get too analytical over
Right.
it, and it's just disconnect because
Right.
they're trying to process.
They're trying to process it. So if you stay with the things that they are tangible, like when does this happen, or how often does it happen, or what is it like for you, or what happens when they say that, what do you do? Those are all questions that give them a chance to focus on the reality of it, not what's going on in their head.
And when I've ever done that, when you just even ask just the what question, all of a sudden they kind of realize, oh yeah, and then they actually start to kind of answer their own issue.
Right.
Just because of what?
Right.
Because they're going, well, this happened, but okay, now I know. And you can see the wheels turning in their head,
Right.
From that.
The last thing you want to do is get defensive
Right.
or argumentative, because you'll get stuck. Okay. Then finally, so this is what's called a genogram. A genogram is like a family tree, but it also charts out relationships. So this relationship here is what would be called disconnected. This would be called conflictual, the red lines. That's a close relationship. That's this is from Star Wars. But the reason doing your own work is important as a leader is it will help you to understand what makes you tick, and it will help you to learn to be more of a non-anxious presence. What I realized in my 30s was I had never actually taken healthy stands with my mother. I'd never ever told her, like, if she told me to do something, I just did it, even if I got resentful. I just gave in and did it. But I never told her how I actually felt. Well, that's not good. You know why? Because then when I'm with other people, I have a hard time telling them how I actually feel. All right? When I want to go in and wear a mask, maybe I'm worried about what people think, But at one point, when I heard my call to ministry, I knew I had to call my mom and tell her. And my parents, I wasn't raised Christian, so I'm not from a Christian household. I knew they weren't going to understand. And so I was really anxious about it. But I finally called and I said, Mom, I feel called to do this. This is part of my growing in faith. I want to make a difference in the world. So I was self-differentiating, being a non-anxious presence. And for the next month, boy, we didn't go at it. She just tried to convince me. She would call me, do you really believe in the virgin birth? Do you know you're never going to have any money?
Right.
All of these things, right? And I would just and because it was God's call, I think this is a Holy Spirit thing, I was very calm about it. I was able to stand up to my mother, and I was able to say, you know, Mom, I really believe this is what I'm supposed to do. And after about a month, she called and said, if this is what you really want to do, Dad and I will support you. And then about another month later, she was a quilter at the time. She sent me a round wall hanging of a nativity. And,
Oh, wow.
You know,
That's nice.
you know, not even a Christian, but
Yeah.
and ever since then, that was 1990, I think. I have been able to get better at saying what I really believe or saying what I really feel in situations. Now, not always, you know. I mean, it's most of us. It's hard for us to do all the time. In fact, according to the theory, most of us can't even do it 50% of the time. Most of the time, we just kind of keep our mouth shut, or we get in an argument. You know, instead of just saying, well, you know, I'm not sure I can agree with you, but that's okay. We don't have to agree. That's the healthy way to do things. But it's hard. But when we do that work in our family of origin, when we look back and say, you know, where does this come from? Where does my anxiety come from? It actually helps us to grow as a leader. And that's what that book is about, actually. If you met my family, you'd understand. It's the same material, but it's basically just about how to do work in your own family. And my wife told me that I should have written that first, but it was actually the third book I wrote. So my wife is usually right, but I didn't listen to her. So, anyway.
Sometimes it just works better this way.
Yeah, well, you know, I did what came. So,
Yep.
And then finally, I love Soren Kierkegaard's saying, "Now, Lord, with your help, I shall become myself," because I think that's the essence of self-differentiation. That it's the grace of God that enables us to be the person God wants us to be, and that's self-differentiation. So, those are the two books. I also have a podcast, and that's my website. And
So what's the NonAnxious Leader podcast?
yeah, the NonAnxious Leader podcast. Been doing it for a couple years now, 2.5 years.
Got to get some links to that.
Yeah, if you Google my name, or if you type my name into like Apple Podcasts or whatever, it should pop right up.
You've got like 3 different podcasts.
Yeah, Spotify.
I'll find it.
Yeah. So that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, you know, I did. I don't know. I don't know if you know, but I read as I said, I read the book and I've got it on my Kindle, so I'm reading the book along with you, kind of. And one thing that, boy, as far as I'm concerned, you hit on the head that is just driving me crazy about the current culture. It just cannot relate. Safety is a good thing, but it's important to not let the desire for safety morph into being overly fearful. And I mean, seriously, if this whole COVID thing isn't a metaphor for just that, okay? I get it. There's a disease. People get sick. Some people are even more vulnerable. I get it. But that doesn't mean you morph into this, everybody just stop and drop and then put things in your face and hide behind doors. And you go on and say, we become a society that's afraid of everything. How does this affect leaders?
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, especially being a church leader with all that going on.
It's
and
hard.
And then I've had people, because, you know, maybe I shouldn't have gone there, but I've shared my opinion in general about masks and, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, and to me, it kind of felt like, and I've understood that. I've analyzed that. The whole thing has been sort of to me, an attack against churches because, well, we're trying to keep people from assembling together. And what's the one time that people really assemble together other than to watch the Red Sox, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it's church. We've created a society where we punish those who take risks. And, oh man, again, and that is something I just I don't comprehend. It's absolutely alien to me because my whole life has been, either in corporate world dealing with that or military world. And even when I was going in the church, my first ministry was all about taking risks. This was the church renewal. This was something that they wanted to, get much more aggressive in doing and start doing on a general basis. It was all about risk. How can you, it's like you said, if you're not taking a risk by moving ahead,
you're stuck.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's like you said, then everybody else is just going by you and you really become irrelevant. And to me, that's kind of what has caused the mainline church to disintegrate the way it has to begin with, because it has really let the culture just pass them by. It's become irrelevant to the culture because most of the mainline church just goes, oh yeah, sure, okay, whatever. Yeah, it doesn't matter to me what you believe. It's not really about Jesus and all that stuff. And how can you be a Christian church when,
Yeah, right.
and I saw that in the Methodist Church,
Yeah,
which
well,
was, I'm sure
when
you
I,
have, huh?
When I was going into the ministry, I had a friend who was a Baptist minister, and he was really upset that I was going into the Methodist Church. And he said, I said, why are you upset? Because I grew up in a Methodist church, and I rarely heard the gospel preached.
Yeah.
And I said, well, Bill, don't you think that's a great place for me to be then?
Yeah.
To preach the gospel?
Yeah.
He
Oh,
goes,
yeah.
oh, well, you got a point there.
Oh yeah. No, I totally agree, because believe me, there's still a lot of brothers and sisters there that I know full well preach the gospel. I
Yeah.
have no question in my mind. But I mean, I was in that situation myself. Not with Luttrell, but I had like 5 other pastors. The other one was gospel, and the other one we're gonna make you sit through our next social issue that you have to get all spun up about, and so believe me, and I understand what the church is going through right now, and in a way I'm sitting back kind of applauding, going, all right, because I know the one part of the church will be, go back to John Wesley and all that stuff. And I get it. There's always social issues you kind of have to deal with,
Yeah.
but by default. But
we're in the world, but not of the world.
right, but you got to
Yeah.
deal with the gospel. And then if you get to the other stuff, well, where you can, But Seth Godin once wrote that English is my first language. That anxiety is experiencing failure in advance. And that is so what I've seen in the church. I'm not talking about just here, just, in general, in the churches I've been. It's this whole, well, we've already failed. What's the point in us doing it? Why again, the whole, if we're not advancing, we're retreating. And that's exactly how it played. And it's so difficult to get convey that, we can't.
Non-anxious presence.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the mainline church is again, people grew up in the 50s, 60s, even 70s. Well, it wasn't an issue because everybody went to church.
Right.
And
I think that actually is part of the downfall.
Exactly.
Church became something you did. It wasn't so much about your own faith.
Preach it, brother.
Yeah.
Don't
But
stop.
I wasn't in the church then. So what do I know?
Right. Yeah. And I wasn't either. And
Yeah.
when it did become a lot more visible in the 80s, I did become a Christian at that point, because and not only that, but the Holy Spirit took me and slapped me around like a cartoon rabbit.
Don't do that.
So
That's what happened to me.
wake up, dude.
I was baptized in January of 1988, and I was the pastor by July of 1991.
Holy moly!
Yeah,
God bless you.
it was quick.
Yeah.
Talk about getting slapped around. Anyway, it's been good to be with you, and because I don't know if there are everybody's
I,
online.
yeah, there are, but I put it out there. If you get questions, post them, but I haven't seen them. But yeah, I really, it's so much of what you said really does, resonate, especially with having been in ministry, in difficult situations. And I think that this really is, like you said, I've had these discussions with people in the hierarchy, and they give me this appalled look like, I just, like Luther said, I violated the Virgin Mary or something. It's, and I think that we really all have to kind of come to the realization, like you said, and that was my experience back in York, was at some point you gotta drop the rope that you're getting pulled back on, and okay, I'm heading this way, whoever wants to follow, and they do.
Mhm.
That's
right.
And I think that maybe it's not the way you want them to, or the way that you think that they should be following, but so long as you're just getting that participation and at least not the resistance, then at least you're, in a position where you can actually do something.
Where you can get somewhere.
Yeah.
Where you can move. All right.
Well, I appreciate it, and believe me, I assure you that I will bring this up to at least our circuit, and we are going to have a professional. It's going to be online, but we are having a professional church workers conference. We're having one coming up in October, so I don't know if it's too soon for to try to set something up. But we are again having one in May, and I think that this would be very professional church workers conferences for church workers in this district, and that goes from all of Maryland down to South Carolina, and there's about 4,000 congregations.
I'm actually keynoting this is ELCA, the Tri-Synodical Annual Conference. So it's 3 synods out Iowa. So
Wow.
I was supposed to go to Des Moines in 2 weeks, but they just went virtual.
I bet you're all excited about that,
Well,
Des Moines. The conference,
yeah,
Des Moines.
but now it's all virtual, so I'll be doing it virtual.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, if that works for you, I can certainly bring it up to
Sure, yeah.
our bishop and to
I said you would autograph.
Oh yes.
You promised.
Yes.
So,
I want one too.
I'll give you one.
But no, I'll buy it. Come on.
I think I've seen signs for the camp on 213.
Yeah. And you can get it online. Amazon.
You definitely want to go check it out.
Yeah, I'd like to go see the
Yeah,
signs.
Yeah,
it really is.
You have the other book there as well. I could go.
Last time I was back in there, it was only nothing.
I would love to see it.
Oh, it's really nice. It really is. I've been to retreat center.
This would really work in any organization.
Yeah.
It's good, not just
$10.
this is all
$10 for the book.
Oh no.
for you.
Oh, come
yes.
on. How much I'm
For me,
giving you?
it's free. But that's free.
You got it back.
You can pay $10.
That's the retail price.
Oh, I should have gotten the wholesale price.
Yeah.
Can you? Oh, thank you, sir. Can you?
Thank you.
Can you send me something that I could pass on?
Mhm, sure.
So that way I'm not misrepresenting you, and because I really do. Yeah, that's my money.
Oh,
Because really, and I'm, I think especially for the PCW conference, it would, it would be very, very helpful. Like I said, it's all going to be virtual at this point. So, I mean, that way it's in Virginia. The headquarters is in Alexandria, so you don't have to travel to Richmond or anything.
Yeah,
But,
right. Well, and I would go anywhere people want me to speak. I would go. Well, thank you very much.
I will pass that on, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Like I said, I Joyce, myself, Betsy, all had other people say, yeah, I'm gonna be there.
I understand.
Absolutely.
I've been in churches before. So.
Let's do that again.
It's a little,
Outer Banks, we go to the Outer Banks.
You go to the other bank?
Yeah, every year. Well, lately Avon.
Oh, you're
Village.
way down
Yeah, or do you go like
No.
Corolla? Yeah.
there. Corolla,
Yeah.
we would go to Corolla around the beach, but,
Yeah.
then Jeff would go down to,
5868 Rock
across the,
Road.
to Oakland.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
all the way down.
Way down.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what that means.
That's the address. That's where the bars are.
Oh, really?
And then you don't see it.
Now,
This
I
is a
have no
really
idea
good-
where Rock Road
This is
okay, Keith.
starts at.
It's a good leadership.
So you're Chestertown.
Pat's Fairley, you know that for sure. Yeah.
You know,
So-
leadership.
So House Fire, that's where I.
Well, thank you.
No, it's-
Yeah, that's why I do it.
Yeah. What all the stuff there we're going to
Yeah, right. Nice to meet you. Good to see
Second
you.
career, it's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah,
So Mark and Frank were.
thank you, appreciate it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah.
And, maybe we can set something up again.
Okay.
Where we can, where we're a little more, have a little more stability.
Well, and two, if you have a whole group of people from all over the place, I can do it virtually.
Well,
you know.
well, that's true, yeah. I mean,
I can do it right from my computer.
it's like you said, we made it known to all the clergy in the area here.
Okay, well, everybody's busy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All righty, take care.
God bless.
All right.
Thanks.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
And a lot of this, I knew, but it's so nice to have somebody kind of say, boom, 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 and you going, yeah, that's right.
It's nice to go back to basics.
Yeah, exactly. And just get affirmed in the stuff that you sure you knew, but then you get, like I said, I mean, I've had that discussion, with leadership and, circuit and that kind of stuff, and I get this appalled look like, what the heck is your problem? And it's like, well, now I get some backup. I'll buy you the book, dude.
Well, this is good. I'm looking forward to reading.
Thanks for coming. And
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I don't have a hard. I was kind of counting on bringing a hard copy.
No, that's
So,
okay. I'll
mine's
go
on-
out and take a look at the place, and he has the other books
Yeah.
there, so
Well, that's true.
I
Yeah,
can easily go pick
yeah.
one up. I have time. I can drive around. So I'm really good.
I'm retired.
You don't work no more.
I can do what I want, when I want.
There we go.
Nice.
It is a good feeling though.
I'll take your word for it.
It's really weird. Yeah, I did. So where's that fire?
This is 800 block from.
I think that's up this way because I think the numbers end like around 2000, right in Rock Hall.
No. You're on Churchill Road,
No,
and it goes so far, and then it turns
Where-
over to Rock Hall.
we're on Chestertown Road.
I mean, Chestertown
Okay.
Road. Then you go so far, and that's when I asked how far down did it go, and you said something like fairly, which is probably the way it is. This
Yeah,
is
I
down
think it
out
starts
Rock
where that
Hall Road.
goofy little fork intersects, with
Yeah.
the main road.
Where the tower is.
Yeah.
That's from the beginning of Rock Hall Road.
Right.
This is on Rock Hall Road,
Right.
which is the same actual road you live on.
But I'm saying I think that's closer to us. I don't think
It's
it's.
probably
I don't
starting-
think it's down by the
probably
beach.
beginning. 58.5,
Right. Yeah. Right.
Now it goes
Exactly.
higher as you go down.
Closer to us than the beach. Right.
That's all right. So, you all right?
Yeah,
I'll give it a run. I'll give it a run.
I do. I wonder how many times he was teased about this thing.
Teased.
Yeah.
Teased about what? Oh. Yeah.
Another thing they're gonna show.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I'll give it a run.
Yeah. The first couple of times I interacted with him, I'm like, well, how do you pronounce it?
I'm sure they pronounce it different somehow. or the other.
He did say it came up, like I said, we talked for like an hour when I went down there. It did come up at some point, and he said, yeah, it's been a little awkward at times. Let's just say that. You can tell he's a great guy. He's,
He is.
Yeah. stuff like that.
Good presenter.
And see, I didn't notice he had an earring.
It was in the left ear. I
I didn't know
I only
until
got
he
one.
said something. And then, of course, the.
Oh,
and then
start
he-
checking out his ears.
No, that to me is just not an important reason to not want him as a minister.
If you want to be weird, dude, that's your call.
So you just, no. So, go back over to the, you know what Legion is?
No, you
I'll
can
show
show
you,
me.
I'll show you where it's at.
Yeah, good. I find out all kinds of stuff.
There you go.